Trump ally Mike Johnson elected House Speaker 3 weeks after McCarthy ouster. The Republican led House elected Rep. Mike Johnson as the new House Speaker on Wednesday, a major leadership change that comes 3 weeks after McCarthy was removed. Johnson, a vocal supporter of former President Donald Trump and a key congressional figure in the failed efforts to overturn the 2020 election, will now take the reins of the bitterly divided House Republican majority and faces the looming threat of a government shutdown next month. It's going to be interesting. I mean, I don't know if this was him, but didn't he say something about getting funding for foreign aid for Israel or war or something? Maybe that wasn't him. I don't know what I'm seeing, but I'm curious what's going to happen. What's the first thing they're going to do? Is it going to be government funding? And is he going to go the same route as Kevin McCarthy and go for the? Is that a recording of me?
No, it's not a recording of you. I thought I had this on. I wanted to see what the live chat looked like.
Oh, okay.
And son of a gun, yeah, because it's always amusing. It's okay.
Can I turn the volume now?
No,
yeah, but I'm wondering what's
Yeah, he did.
Semi-retarded is one of the features. Everyone knows I'm a lawyer, and everyone knows that I'm brain damaged. Okay.
All right. Well, you're doing well. But the question, I suppose, is Mike Johnson going to be based or cringe?
So it's like Schrodinger's speaker right now. We don't know yet. He's like he's in a temporary stasis while we wait to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of fun to see people pretending. And Libby and I were talking before. Like, neither of us is going to pretend. Oh yeah, of course. Mike Johnson. Never heard of him. Never freaking heard of him. And I've like been I guess I'm not like a politics junkie like some people, but I'm pretty interested in politics.
Yeah.
And
maybe that's why he's the one who got the speakership, because everyone's just like, I don't know enough about him to complain.
So he's like last round draft pick at this point. They tried everyone else and they can't get anybody else to get through.
Yeah.
Because we were just talking yesterday saying like, we don't know how long this is going to take. And selfishly I was like, yes, less government spending is going on right now while we wait for this to get figured out. But now, yes, I do think they'll end up turning back on government spending.
I don't think there's going to be a shutdown now.
You don't think so? You think they'll get something to do?
Yeah,
well,
they got a speaker.
Just, checking it out, and apparently Johnson has been skeptical toward Ukraine of late, though he supported them initially and supported U.S. funding for Ukraine initially, and now he is interested to know where our money is being spent, which I think is a good thing. I think we should know where the $113 billion in less than 2 years has gone. As for Israel, he does seem much more pro-Israel.
Than whom?
Than, for example,
than Ukraine,
than Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib or some of the other squad members in the House. And he says the U.S. unequivocally stands with Israel, will provide support and resources necessary to rid the world and the Middle East of Hamas.
It's not just going to be Hamas. It's going to be World War III.
Well, that may be, but that's where Mike Johnson stands.
So what's the scenario? Well, how's it World War III? How does that happen?
There's two scenarios that have been presented by two prominent scenarios I've read. One was from Ben Shapiro and one was from a former military chief out of the UK. Ben Shapiro's position is if the U.S. does not get involved, then you're going to see an escalation between Hamas and Israel, which results in Hezbollah and Iranian-backed militias attacking Israel. Israel's retaliation will result in an escalation, eventually pulling in Iran entirely, unless...
I didn't hear the world... That sounds like a regional conflict.
Once Iran is involved, Israel then resorts to the Samson option, nuclear weapons or counter invasions into foreign countries, which turns this into Iran then calls in its allies, Saudi Arabia gets involved, and one by one dominoes begin falling. Now that's Ben's argument. I'm probably not giving it full justice.
Ben is a super smart guy.
And I read that from him. But the counter argument is if the U.S. gets involved, it will result in Iran then directly intervening in the region, which then brings in Russia, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, Russia, not a thing anymore.
You don't think Russia's going to back Iran?
Russia can barely take care of itself in Ukraine. They don't have the resources, and their military capacity has been so severely demonstrated to be hollow. I mean, their weapon systems, their command and control.
But elaborate on that. What do you mean?
One of the main reasons their armor has failed so magnificently, and so many things that they were counting on happening have not happened, is because the corruption, lack of training, and lack of resources has not been fully appreciated by the leadership.
But that's the history of Russia.
That's exactly
to
right.
the Napoleonic Wars.
That's exactly right. But that's
World Wars I and II.
But so the only way, the only deterrent Russia has now as a counterweight to pretty much, to a first world military like the United States or Europeans is nuclear. But even there are serious questions about whether even their nuclear deterrent is, like, you can't just take a snapshot of 1989 and say, okay, well, they still have those missiles. Yeah, but if they haven't been maintaining them and upgrading them,
right, and many of them were in other territories.
And it's not only that, well, what the hell? I mean, they'll shoot off a bunch of them, right? No, you have to know, when you use nuclear weapons, you have to know exactly what's going to happen. Yeah, there's a certain margin of error.
But this doesn't. I don't think that counters the point that if the conflict bleeds out beyond Ukraine, if the U.S. gets dragged into 4 or 5 different war fronts, then you have a world war.
Well, if the United States,
we're already at war with Russia.
Right. Well, that is true, and I mean, I'm just curious. Historically, when we looked at conflicts in the Middle East, there was this concern of the Soviet Union, which had a well-developed relationship with Arab clients until the 80s, and that began to crack up in the 80s, acting as a counterweight to the United States, and that had a lot to do with the way wars ended in 67 and 73 and in the 80s. But Russia isn't the Soviet Union, and the relationships, I mean, China is more of
but I still don't think this addresses what we're talking about. I mean, I don't think the argument is that there is a gigantic Godzilla monster we're scared of. What we're concerned about is dozens of nations entering conflict. That's the world war. It's not like we're in this Cold War scenario where it's like the Soviet Union and the U.S. are going to start firing nukes at each other. The concern is we're already at war in Ukraine. We are facing a potential war with China in Southeast Asia, and now we've got the Middle East bubbling up, and the U.S. is sending massive fleets. I think they announced that many more destroyers, ships are being sent out.
Well, I mean, I think the relevant question for almost everyone watching and listening is, I don't really care. I think most people are saying which of these Middle East countries have at each other. When we talk about I'm afraid of World War III, what we really are saying is, are Americans going to be involved?
Well, that's the part we want to.
That's the part
but
we're
we are.
Well,
we've got 19,000 personnel in the Mediterranean, not including the latest deployments, and we've got troops recently deployed into Europe, into Poland, with our active. We have special forces operating in Ukraine.
So all I'm saying is, I think I'm actually making to some extent an argument about terminology, because maybe it's because I'm an old Cold Warrior. When I hear World War III, I think, the big one, and you're agreeing with me. No, we're not really talking about the big one. We're talking about a more than local conflict.
No, we're talking about the big one.
We're talking about the big. So I haven't heard that yet.
But I think it sounds like what you're saying is there has to be one gigantic bad guy.
I'm saying that the United States is, notwithstanding all the damage that's been done to the military and in terms of readiness and all the things, is the sole hegemon in military affairs in the world. There are competitors, but there's number one is far and away the United States. The two carrier groups that are already in the region are already untouchable by pretty much everyone. So the question is, does the United States get to do whatever it wants, or does it have to worry about a meaningful, in other words, all right,
well, that is
do we have to worry about Iran?
Yeah, that's a good question. Can the United States do whatever it wants, or does it have to worry about enemies who could take it down in certain ways?
I mean, the thing about the United States,
haven't we seen that though? Hasn't I'm not remembering exactly, but didn't we have ships in the Middle East at one point, and they were taken down by Iran with it was like a David and Goliath type of thing, and they took us down with
not
little.
Well, there was, I think, there was an attack.
Yeah.
It wasn't Iran. I'm sure paid for it.
I'm
which
not
in other words
remembering
means
exactly what
the
it
Biden
was. Yeah.
Now that would be the Biden administration paying it through Iran. I think that was yes, there was like a dinghy.
There was a dinghy,
rolled up.
with
but
some
in
little
terms
bombs on it.
of an old fashioned, in other words, what we're talking about here. In other words, there's always going to be that counterforce, or that unconventional warfare, guerrilla type of risk. That's a given. The question I think that's really interesting one is, does Iran say to itself, we're going to attack we're going to attack American shipping, or rather American naval assets, because they're enabling the Israelis to embarrass our clients in Gaza? In other words, will they take the role that Russia took when I was a kid and said, Israel's embarrassing the Syrians, we have to now threaten to get involved?
It's reported across the board that U.S. bases have been attacked by Iranian-backed militias using drones and other means, injuring dozens. The U.S. has announced that they will respond to this and are sending out more assets into the region. The U.S. asked Israel to delay their invasion of Gaza to allow the U.S. to deploy more personnel and Patriot missile systems and THAAD systems. Those seem to be specifically for Iran. The concern being that as soon as Israel invades Gaza, then Iran is going to ramp up in some capacity, and maybe it's just through militias, but the U.S. considers those already to be Iran, and is sending out missiles to prepare for conflict with Iran. And it's not just about Iran, it's about Iran, Russia, China, and any other country in between. It doesn't need to be one big baddie the U.S. is scared of. It needs to be that we're already at war with Russia, no question. We add in multiple fronts and you have World War. World War II was not just Hitler. You had the Pacific Theater as well, which is literally what brought us into the World War. Japan was not our big baddie. No one ever talks about I forgot his name. What was the name of the Japanese emperor in World War II?
Hirohito.
Yeah, Hirohito. We don't go like, we talk about the atrocities of Hirohito. No, nobody cares. Hitler and
some
Germany.
People care. I mean,
no. I mean, what I'm saying is, in America, culturally, we say Hitler and Germany, they were the big bad guys.
Right.
Even though it was World War and we were pulled into it because of Hirohito.
Right.
So we could be pulled into a world war that involves Xi Jinping or whoever else. And
my take on it as just a lawyer in New Jersey. Okay, I'm not a military affairs expert, but I don't believe China considers it worth it to them to get involved in this militarily. I don't think Russia has the capacity, but none of that.
China's not going to get involved.
Don't you think China could get involved with Taiwan? And then Biden had said that we will militarily defend Taiwan.
Yeah. And then, they've said we can afford 3 wars.
I mean, could we potentially be spending in Ukraine? We already have guys on the ground in Ukraine and Kyiv, like the special forces guys. Could we be spending and having guys in the Middle East and spending and having guys in the South China Sea? That's a likely scenario? That would look like a world war to me.
So are you saying that China would opportunistically,
yes,
say, well, for the U.S., all right, so
which then results in Vietnam losing it because China's already been blowing up Vietnamese fishing vessels, claiming the South China Sea is their own.
South China Sea is a gigantic issue. Yeah.
Then you get Australia, then you get South Korea, you get Japan. The region erupts. Now you have massive regional political warfare, hot conflict in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, World War.
And didn't we just give Australia or sell Australia a bunch of nuclear subs?
Well,
I feel like that happened.
That was a while ago.
That was a while ago.
I vaguely remember the details, but I do know that the U.S. has been working with Australia specifically because of China and Taiwan. The U.S. needs base of operations for the region. What people need to understand when it comes to Taiwan is that Taiwan is, like 70 miles or something off of the coast of mainland China. So for the U.S. to be able to defend Taiwan, you need a place to have your ships and refuel your planes. And that is massively difficult, if not impossible, considering mainland China is literally right there. And they're going to have an endless supply, stack it all right next to the shore. And they're going to be like, I can do this all day. Now, if they move on Taiwan, the fear is that Japan's going to lose it, South Korea is going to lose it, Vietnam's going to lose it. Then you've got all the other smaller countries. You've got Indonesia, you've got Singapore, you've got the Philippines.
So, but is the argument that they would otherwise not do this if the U.S. were not paying attention to what's going on in the Middle East?
If we weren't, my feeling is like, when I think about China being opportunistic, I think if the U.S. weren't so extended, they wouldn't have the opportunity to go about doing that. Yeah,
I hear that.
But I do think that China moving on Taiwan is an inevitability. The issue is just that the U.S. seems to think Joe Biden, Janet Yellen, we can afford 2 wars. We can afford 3 wars.
Well, yeah. Do they believe that we can afford 3, right? Like, what better time is there to wait? Are they literally waiting for a third conflict? They're like, oh, we're not going to go on the 3rd one. We're going to go on the 4th one, right? Like, is there a better time for them to do that when we are as overextended as we are right now?
I mean, are we overextended?
I believe we. I mean,
in what way?
Like, I believe
massively.
that. Yeah.
No. I don't mean an adjective. I want to hear. I want metrics.
Are we
financially? Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Oh, financially.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought that we just print money now. I didn't realize that was a factor.
Well, when they're talking about it, when they were talking about financially, we can afford 3 wars when we know that we can't.
We are overextended. We have a military presence defending the borders of Ukraine and not our southern border, and that is the definition of overextended.
Well, no, I can't agree with you on that because that's just a definition of bad policy. The reason that we're not doing anything about the southern border isn't because we're out of money. It's because there's no will to do it. I mean, that's an entirely purposeful. I mean,
it's fair to say that they spend the money when they want to spend the money.
They're sending people to Texas to cut the wires that prevent immigrants from coming in. That costs money. It's a matter of that's a policy choice.
They're like 31 trillion in debt, 35 trillion in debt. What does it matter?
But I think it is really important to define our terms. So when we say overextended, I mean financially, it's a freaking disaster. But there is no consideration whatsoever. I mean, we've been spending like a drunken sailor for 10 years. When's the last time an actual budget was passed?
We don't do that.
No.
Yeah, that's not a thing.
Debt ceiling.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.